I'm Alan of Creative Pixel Photos, and I'd like to teach you some of the things I know about photography. I've lost the date now. Anyway, yesterday was lockdown, so there's going to be an awful lot of people like me, millions of us, sitting at home, bored out of their brains, and I'm a wedding family and boudoir photographer. As you can imagine, all of my work has completely stopped. Normally at this time I'd have 2,000 photos to process and edit, albums to create, pictures to get framed, and so on and so forth. Nothing. So I thought I would do a video course that will teach you to take better photographs. Let me explain who I am. I first got my I got my first camera when I was 12. I've been a keen photographer ever since. Some would say just a mad photographer, but mad keen photographer. I've been full-time professional for 7 years. I did do paid work before that, but full-time for 7 years. I've photographed 150 weddings, 200 families, 100 boudoir shoots. So this is really my job. It is literally my full-time work. Hence why all this is a bit of a disaster. But nonetheless, let's do the best we can. So what I want to do is, over the next, I don't know how long, but through maybe the next 20, 30 videos, pass on everything I know that will help you become a better photographer and to produce better photographs. So who is this for? Well, if you've got a camera, whether that's a DSLR, a mirrorless, a compact, whatever type of camera you've got, whether you've not looked at it or touched it for 6 months, or whether you were out yesterday taking some photographs, I think you'll get something out of some of the videos that I'm going to do. May not be the first one, may not be the second, but at some point there will probably be something that you'll find useful. Therefore, and as I'm only doing this on Facebook, these aren't going on YouTube. I have no desire to compete with, not meaning to be disrespectful, but I have no desire to compete with a 25-year-old who found how to use a camera 18 months ago and thinks he can teach people how to be a photographer. So I'm just keeping these videos on my Facebook page here. So if you would like this page, then hopefully Facebook will tell you next time I post a video. If it doesn't, I'll be doing about 2 a week, maybe 3, and we'll be covering everything right from the very beginning right through to some fairly advanced stuff. So I'd said earlier, just now, that I wanted to teach you and give you information and explain how to take better photographs. So the subject of today, and all these videos probably only going to be 10 or 15 minutes, the subject of today is what is a better photograph? Because unless we know what we're trying to achieve, then it's a bit difficult to actually get there, of course. As a side issue, can I just explain, I'm not talking competition photography. If you've got any desire to get into competition photography, then this is not the place to be. Competition photography is a whole different animal to normal photography. If I gave one of my clients a photograph that I would put into a competition, they would probably give me a very strange look and wonder why I'd given them this weird photograph. Just as a quick example, the Sony Worldwide competition a few months back, the second prize winner was a photograph of an empty room, bare floorboards, paint peeling off the walls, one little window with a wooden chair in the room. And that was it. And that won second prize. I have no idea. So it's a whole different ball game. We're talking normal photography for normal people. So, what makes a photo better than another photo? There are, as human beings, we have certain things that are the same. We're wired the same. We have the same basic construction. And whilst you might like red and I like blue, we have the same ways of interpreting colour. It's just that your preference is red and mine is blue. But there are certain rules which, if you apply to a photograph, and you did one photograph that complied with these rules and one that didn't, then probably 80% of people that you showed these two photographs to, 80% would prefer the one that complied to the rules of photography. So what are these rules? There's not many, it's not complicated, and I'm not going to go into a huge depth. People have written volumes about each one of these things. So if you want to do more research, if you want to go onto YouTube and find out more, do a bit of research yourself, brilliant. But let me point you in the right direction. Number one, rule of thirds. If you've read anything or you've done any sort of research about taking good photographs, rule of thirds will have come into it. I'll explain that in a second. Leading lines. Number two. Number three, and for me, personally, the most important one, light and shadow. Number four is depth, and number five is composition. Someone is going to say, yeah, but what about so-and-so, so-and-so? Yes, there are more, but these are, for me, the ones that I think are most important and that will have the biggest effect for the least effort and in your photography. By the way, if you're wondering, am I going to cover how do I use my camera because you don't know what this dial does and that dial does, sorry, I didn't mention, yes, of course we're going to cover that. In fact, that's going to be the next lesson. So let's go through those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things. Rule of thirds. If you take a photograph and your subject, whatever that may be, is in the centre of the photograph, it doesn't look as good to us human beings as if it's off to one side slightly. And in fact, if it sits on, if you divide the photo into thirds, so you've got two lines, a third of the way across each, if the subject is sitting on those lines, be that vertically or horizontally, for some reason, and I don't understand, and even if I did I wouldn't try and explain it, it's just not necessary, we find that more pleasing. It seems to have more balance. The photograph just looks more comfortable. So when you're taking a photograph, try and take it so that your subject is not slap bang in the middle, but off to one side. Now most cameras have got grids that show up in your viewfinder. You don't need to be that accurate, you don't need grids or you don't need to measure it or anything crazy. As long as it is kind of over this side or over that side or up there, then it's going to look more pleasing. There's a problem, and we'll come on to that tomorrow when we talk about cameras, if you've got a DLSR, because most focusing areas on a DLSR, in fact, don't go out far enough for you to actually focus and take the shot with the subject a third of the way across, or 2/3 of the way, whichever, across the frame. They just don't go out far enough. So hence the technique on DLSRs, which is focus, recompose and shoot. We'll be covering that tomorrow. If you've got a mirrorless camera, no problem, covers the whole screen and so on. Anyway, we'll cover that tomorrow. But rule of thirds, that's it. And that can be the subject, or I should have brought it in. I took a photograph 25 years ago. It's a sunrise. well, it's not actually a sunrise because the sunrise was actually about 20-30 minutes away. It was. My apologies, I was interrupted by a phone call then, so I've kind of lost my thread. I was saying about the rule of thirds, and it doesn't have to be a subject that sits on these 1/3 lines. It can be the whole picture. And I don't know how far I got, but I was saying that 25 years ago I took a photograph of a sunrise, and it's still one of my favourite pictures, and that's it. It was about actually half an hour before, 20 minutes before the sunrise. The light was just changing from completely dark to just starting to show some light, and it was around about that time that I took this shot. And back then I was really keen photographer. I can't remember if I actually knew about the rule of thirds, but you'll notice that this shot is divided into 3. We've got a line across there, we've got a very significant line there. That maybe could have been a little bit higher up, but you can see it's roughly divided into 3. And that, I think, is why this picture works for me. You might think it's rubbish, but that's photography for you. So that's the rule of thirds. Leading lines. This is any situation where you have something, anything. It can be a fence, a row of cars, a row of hills, that leads your eye towards the subject. So your subject is in the distance and something is kind of pointing towards that. As I say, it can be anything. I've probably taken a few photos like it, but as I say, it's not, in my view, it's not a hugely important aspect of better photography. The one that is light and shadow. Now, when you take a photo with your smartphone, or possibly with your camera, most non-professionals, and sadly even quite a few professionals, think that photography is about recording reality. So they'll take a photo, look on the back of the screen, does that photo look like what I'm seeing here? And they're trying to get that photo to look the same as what they actually see. And that, to them, to most people, is a good photograph. I try and create photographs that are a long way from reality. They're my favourite photographs. Now, I can't go overboard with weddings and stuff like that, but when it comes to my personal photography and what I want to pass on to you, I would try and, when I look at the back of the screen, I want that photograph, what I see there, to be totally different to what's out there. I want this to be much more artistic. I want it to have depth, to have feeling, to tell a story, much more than what I see in front of me. And the one really important way to do that is light and shadow. As I say, tomorrow we'll get onto the technical stuff, but most cameras, most people will use, for their exposure on the camera, full screen metering or evaluative metering or matrix metering. It uses the information from the whole screen to work out what the exposure should be. And what your camera tries to do is to get everything as close as possible to 50% grey. So it's smack bang in the mid-tones so that you haven't lost the highlights, so the bright parts of the photograph have still got some detail. The shadow isn't too dark, you've still got some detail there, and that is what your camera will try and do. I think good photography should go the other way. I want my subject, whatever that may be, to be correctly exposed, but I'm perfectly happy to have tons of shadow, black. I'm perfectly happy to have a lot of brilliant white, depends on the photo of course. because these things add depth. They create a dynamic. It goes from being a photograph to being something that's much more arty, and that, in my opinion, is a better photograph than simply recording reality. Next one is depth. We create depth in a photograph by having layers. So we have a foreground, a midground and a background. Sometimes there's more, sometimes there's 2 foregrounds, the subject, and maybe 2 backgrounds. But having those in the photograph gives us depth and adds feeling to the photograph. And finally, composition, where you put all this together to create a good photograph. Sometimes the emphasis would be on the rule of thirds, sometimes the emphasis will be on depth, sometimes they're all balanced. And this is where photography gets so fascinating and so compelling. I'm going absolutely stir crazy because I haven't photographed a wedding now for about 2 weeks, and I'm just climbing the walls because I just want to take a photograph, and it gets like that once you get into it. Composition is your way of combining these rules in the way that you want. So, for instance, if you were to take a photograph of, say, a bullseye, just a bullseye, okay, for some reason, if you obeyed the rule of thirds and you put that bullseye a third of the way across the picture, that would probably look really weird and it wouldn't work. So all these rules are made to be broken. For something like a bullseye, you would want that slap bang in the middle of the screen. Light and shadow. I've taken photographs which are so overexposed you wouldn't believe it, and all you can really see is just brilliant white with some black bits here and there, and they work brilliantly. So the laws, the rules supposedly of exposure are there to be broken, and that all those things come together as composition. And we will talk more about this as we get several more videos down the road. We'll look at each of these things, as I say, in each of the videos at some point in future. That's just the start. Tomorrow, no, not tomorrow, next video, sorry, which will probably be 2 or 3 days, we will look, as I said, at using your camera. So we're going to look at DLSRs, mirrorless and compacts. Well, I'll probably do one video about DLSRs or one about mirrorless and compacts, because they are quite different in the way they're used, and hopefully get you confident enough to move off of auto, not to use manual. There's loads of people and videos out there about how to get off, how to use manual, how to get off auto and use manual, and all this kind of stuff. Well, it's not about using manual. I don't use manual for many shots at all. So I'll explain to you how I use a camera, how I set it up. We won't be going into the really, really complex stuff on your camera. There's no need. Providing you've got half a dozen things set correctly, you will take great photos, and that's as far as you need to go. And that's what I'll do in the next video. I hope you join me. Don't forget to like the page and come back in 3 or 4 days and have a look at the next video. Enjoy yourself till then, and take care. Cheers for now.